Welcome to NTD Good Morning.
Here are today's top stories.
President Trump announces the seizure of an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela, further ramping up tensions between the two countries amid a massive military buildup in the region.
The Federal Reserve cut interest rates by 1/4 point in a divided vote. President Trump says the Fed could have done more.
The U.S. House passed the massive defensive policy bill yesterday. We have a closer look at what the $900 billion package includes.
Lawmakers are racing to implement a plan to prevent a spike in health insurance costs for Obamacare recipients. The Senate will vote today on proposals from Democrats and Republicans, while several bipartisan solutions are coming out of the House.
The new Trump Gold Card promises expedited residency for a price, while the administration accelerates deportations and hands a stretch of borderland to the Navy.
What if the person you thought would get your retirement savings ends up with nothing because of a form not being updated? We'll have expert advice on protecting your financial wishes.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephanie Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Today is Thursday, December 11th. You're watching NTD Good Morning.
And in today's top news, President Trump has announced the seizure of a sanctioned oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela.
The president also talking with top European leaders, trying to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine. NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu has more.
President Trump has been actively trying to broker peace for Russia and Ukraine since his January inauguration, often expressing a frustration and disappointment with leaders of both Russia and Ukraine. He's saying that he thinks Ukrainian President Zelensky needs to, quote, be realistic to end this war, a war that he said last month took the lives of 27,000 soldiers. This is coming as the president spoke with top European leaders about ending the war, and the president said that those leaders want American, Ukrainian, and European leaders to meet in Europe this weekend to continue those negotiations. Take a look.
We discussed Ukraine in pretty strong words, and we'll see what happens. They would like us to go to a meeting over the weekend in Europe, and we'll make a determination depending on what they come back with. Sometimes you have to let people fight it out, and sometimes you don't. But the problem with letting people fight it out is you're losing thousands of people a week. It's ridiculous.
Meanwhile, President Trump is announcing that the U.S. has seized a sanctioned oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela, ratcheting up tensions with Venezuela amid a massive military buildup in the region. And Attorney General Pam Bondi is saying that the U.S. authorities, with support from the Department of War, executed a seizure warrant for this oil tanker, which was sanctioned by the U.S. for years due to what she calls its, quote, involvement in an illicit oil shipping network supporting foreign terrorist organizations. This comes as the War Secretary Pete Hegseth has faced allegations of war crimes by some lawmakers, and a wave of recent reporting has focused on alleged strains in his relationship with the president. And President Trump was asked about that reporting, and he said this. Watch.
I think my cabinet's fantastic. I read the same stories that I'm unhappy with this one or that one, and I'm not. I think the cabinet's done a great job. I read a story that I was unhappy with Pete because he was attacking drug dealers. I said, that's not exactly right. I would say very much the opposite. Pete Hegseth has been phenomenal. I read a story recently, I'm unhappy with Christie. I'm so happy with it. I mean, we have a closed border. We have a border that's the best border in the history of our country. Why would I be unhappy? She's fantastic, actually. No, we have a fantastic cabinet, really fantastic cabinet. I mean, Lutnick I'll have to think about. No,
can't have everything.
Can't have everything. He's doing great. Well, Howard's done really well, and Scott's done really well. We have just a fantastic cabinet.
Other members of President Trump's cabinet have faced intense scrutiny during their first year in office, including the FBI Director Kash Patel and HHS Secretary RFK Jr. But President Trump has thus far defended his cabinet members, with the White House saying that he could not be happier with his team.
Thanks to Mari for that report. Next, Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado is in Oslo, Norway, after secretly leaving Venezuela. She did not arrive in time to receive her prize, but she spoke at a news conference earlier in the day.
I am very hopeful Venezuela will be free, and we will turn a country into a beacon of hope. I believe that our experience in Venezuela conveys to the world a testimony that certainly in order to have peace, you require democracy. Democracy is the system that enables peace in a society. But you cannot have democracy without freedom.
Her daughter accepted the award in her place yesterday and delivered Machado's message about the importance of democracy. Machado ultimately surfaced in Oslo after secretly leaving Venezuela by boat, her first public appearance in nearly a year. 4 Latin American presidents traveled to Oslo to show support for the Venezuelan opposition leader. After winning the Peace Prize in October, Machado dedicated it to the people of Venezuela and to President Trump for supporting their cause. Speaking to reporters earlier today, she said she plans to travel back to Venezuela despite the risks, which include death from the Machado regime as a risk.
And what does President Trump's latest escalation against the Maduro regime mean for the potential of a full-scale war? Can Maduro weather Trump's pressure campaign with support from Iran, China, and Russia? For analysis, we're now joined by Colonel Grant Newsham, a senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy. Grant, as we look at these escalations almost daily, you can't help but think this is moving toward something. So specifically, you saw those troops rappelling from helicopters onto the oil tanker. What does that mean in terms of this broader campaign?
Well, it's certainly tightening the pressure on the Maduro regime. It depends on illegal exports of oil, and the Americans have known all about it. Others have as well, yet they've allowed it to continue despite sanctions. So you choke off these illegal exports that have slipped out, and it gets a lot tougher for the Maduro regime. They simply need the money, and it all comes from oil exports and also serving as a drug shipment transit point. But it's tightening the economic pressure, and it will require, if Maduro is to survive, it will require the Chinese to provide him with some convertible currency, with some money. The Iranians, the Russians, well, they may not be so willing to keep funding him. So it's tightening the pressure, waiting to see if Maduro is going to step down, and if the results of the 2024 election will actually be enforced. It's that simple. This was an election that was stolen, and even people who normally don't admit such things in the international community all agree on this. And all you have to do is have Maduro say, "I'm done, enough," and things will change very quickly. So Mr. Trump, I think, is hoping to have it happen, have this regime change in effect, or actually the installation of a lawfully elected government. Have that happen peacefully, but he's waiting to see what the next step is.
And in terms of Trump's suggestion of land strikes escalating from just sea strikes, do you think that that's coming soon, and what could that look like?
Well, one never quite knows with these situations. Sometimes they go very quickly, other times they drag on for weeks, although one wonders just how long this can drag on. But you would find strikes against very sort of limited targets, strategic targets. You could easily shut down the entire Venezuelan oil industry with some very limited strikes. You could hit some targets, say, of the Venezuelan secret police, their intelligence services, really the enforcement, the repression arms of this illegitimate regime.
Now, in terms of the illegitimate regime, in terms of control of the military, if he was to not go peacefully, are risk mitigation steps necessary for potentially him, acting out in a way that, if he feels an existential threat and needs to be somehow put down, what types of measures could be put in place to prevent anything catastrophic?
Well, you're going to have to really be willing to play hardball. and go after the Venezuelan military, particularly its command and control centers. You could go after particularly the senior officers who prop up this regime. And I think many of them are probably wondering if it's trying best to cut a deal now, instead get away with some of their wealth and not get hurt. Maduro himself, you go after the symbols of repression and control. And you do that, and you will find that the regime sort of fades away. If you do this in half measures and dribs and drabs, then it has a chance to sort of collect its wits and put together some sort of a defense. But one does wonder, really, just how solid the military support for Maduro is. I suspect it's not all that much, and there's not too many people, too many senior officers, as it is, who are willing to go die for this fellow. And Maduro himself, he must be wondering, should I take an offer and be allowed to leave and sort of live out my life somewhere? Or will I be a fugitive forever and maybe not have a particularly good life expectancy at the moment? So he's no doubt weighing these things. That would be my sort of assessment of how it's happening. But Venezuela has the regime, it has an immensely little public support, and that was borne out in that recent election and previous elections as well that have been rigged, but not this last one. It was rigged, but it was probably 90% for the opposition, for really the unity candidate, Edmundo González Urrutia. And that suggests that the Maduro regime is on pretty shaky foundations.
Well, when we see, as we finish up, Grant, as we see Maria Corina Machado not get to Oslo in time to accept her award, but nonetheless make it to Oslo, Trump had said weeks ago that he had directed the CIA to begin operations inside of Venezuela. Is her ability to be safe and have transport through the U.S. government and through the CIA, what does that, in your view, potentially even look like?
Well, hopefully she's got some good protection. I suspect she does, but the threat to her is immense. The Maduro regime is one that will kill. And there's something up towards 20 extrajudicial killings, for example. You've got tens of thousands of political prisoners in the prisons. It's a nasty regime backed by Cuba, Russia, China, Iran. Make no mistake about it. And she is in great danger. She's incredibly brave to have really stood up for freedom in her country. And if there was ever a chance that you might sort of reinstall real democracy and freedom, ultimately freedom, into Venezuela, she's the manifestation of it. So I hope she's getting some pretty good protection. And I would expect, you mentioned the CIA, that they're making some phone calls around Venezuela to military commanders and a few other people, telling them, look, you don't have much of a choice now. What are you going to do? But she does need to be protected. And this is something that the so-called international community, particularly the free civilized nations, need to do, is to ensure her safety and the safety of her supporters as well. And ultimately what President Trump is trying to do is to reinstate sort of a properly elected government into Venezuela, and to do it as peacefully as possible. But this is a situation where the more willing you appear to use force, the more likely you are to have it happen peacefully. The more half-hearted measures you take, the more likely it is that you're going to have more trouble than you would like.
We'll be watching very closely from Chavez to Maduro. The experiment with communism in Venezuela appears to be potentially coming to its close, and we'll be very excited to continue these dialogues with you as that unfolds. Colonel Grant Newsham, great to see you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, great observations there, and I hope that message from the opposition leader really gets out, considering all that she's been through, to get her voice heard as well. May that continue. Okay, next, the Federal Reserve has approved a quarter-point rate cut in a move Fed Chair Jerome Powell called a close call. President Trump says the cut was too small as he weighs potential replacements for Powell when his term ends in May. Here's more on the Federal Reserve.
The Federal Reserve has approved 9-3, a quarter-point interest rate cut at its final meeting of 2025. The new target range is between 3.5 and 3.75%.
Conditions in the labor market appear to be gradually cooling, and inflation remains somewhat elevated. In support of our goals, in light of the balance of risks to employment and inflation, Today, the Federal Open Market Committee decided to lower our policy interest rate by a 1/4 percentage point.
It was a decision marked by unusually sharp disagreement inside the central bank. Officials who opposed the move either pushed for a deeper reduction or wanted no cut at all, reflecting widening divisions over how to balance slowing employment with persistent inflation. Chair Jerome Powell described the decision as a close call, saying he could have made a case for either side. The Fed also revised its outlook, projecting slower inflation, slightly stronger economic growth, and an unemployment rate holding steady at 4.4%.
We are well positioned to determine the extent and timing of additional adjustments based on the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks.
While the Fed emphasized caution, President Trump criticized the cut as too small, arguing that higher rates are restraining economic growth.
He did a rather, I would say, a rather small number that could have been doubled, at least doubled. And we have to get a mindset that when a country is doing well, you don't want to kill the growth. That's what they're doing. They kill the growth.
The president could name a new Fed chair as soon as later this month to replace Powell when his term ends in May. Trump said he was meeting with former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh. White House Deputy Chief of Staff James Blair told Fox News Wednesday the president has been very clear that he wants lower interest rates.
He wants people to have access to capital so they can buy their cars, they can buy their homes, we can get the economy moving. This is really just a result of, them moving too slowly around there.
The Fed now turns its attention to its next meeting in late January.
Lawmakers are racing to implement a plan to prevent a spike in health insurance costs for Obamacare recipients. The Senate will hold key votes today while several senators put forth their own ideas. Joining us live to discuss is NTD's Melina Weiskup. Good morning, Melina. What's each party's plan to address Obamacare subsidies that are expiring in 3 weeks?
Hi, good morning, Steph. So the Senate is going to vote on 2 bills today, one from the Republican side, one from the Democrat side. Now, remember, the Democrats' bill is for a clean extension of COVID-era Obamacare tax subsidies for the next 3 years. Remember, Steph, this was a vote that Senate Majority Leader John Thune agreed to have as a way to get those Democrat votes needed to reopen the government last month. So it was part of that agreement there. Now, Republicans are countering this proposal with a plan of their own. Their plan would take the money that's granted to the subsidies and put them into healthcare savings accounts to help Americans pay for out-of-pocket costs for healthcare. Listen to what both sides are saying about their proposals.
So, with just days left on the clock, the clearest, cleanest, easiest, and best path left is to bill what Democrats are proposing. A clean extension of current tax credits. That's it. No poison pills, no gimmicks, just relief.
The proposal we'll put out there will bring insurance premiums down. It will be fiscally responsible, and it'll get us away from the practice of giving the money all to the insurance companies and put it back in the hands of the patients.
Now, President Trump a while ago floated this idea of having the healthcare savings accounts as an alternative to Obamacare. So that proposal from Republicans, since it does have Trump's backing, it could be easier to push through Congress with respect to getting Republicans on board with it. But since no Democrat support is likely to be on this bill, it likely won't make it through the Senate. Now, because Senate Majority Leader John Thune scheduled a vote on both the Republican and the Democrat proposals, that indicates that there's not bipartisan consensus on either proposal to get enough votes to get either proposal passed, Steph.
Now, there's more than just these 2 ideas. There are several bills, even bipartisan ones, that are floating around the House at the moment. Where do those efforts stand?
Right. So when you look at the House, there is a similar situation going on with respect to House leadership. So the Democrat leaders want to extend Obamacare subsidies for 3 years, similar to the Senate's version, but that plan won't see even a vote in the House. Here's why, according to House Speaker Mike Johnson. Listen.
There's a lot of people who are very concerned about Obamacare and the fact that the subsidies were created by Democrats for COVID-era limited use and they want to be extended. We just can't get Republican votes on that for lots of reasons, not enough of them. And so, look, my colleagues...
So, Steph, in the House, the Republican leader is not even bringing up the Democrats' bill for a vote like Senate Leader John Thune is doing in the Senate. Now, House Republican leadership says they're proposing a plan of their own, and they're planning to vote on that proposal next week. But the details of that plan haven't yet been rolled out. It's expected to be similar but slightly different than the Senate Republicans' plan. Like you mentioned, there are several bipartisan efforts underway on the health care front. One, of course, we reported on last week. The group is proposing to extend the program of Obamacare and make reforms to address how much government money is actually going towards the Obamacare subsidies. Now there's a new bipartisan effort underway on a discharge petition. Now, Steph, that would force House Speaker Mike Johnson to hold a vote on those expiring Obamacare subsidies. That bill would extend the enhanced subsidies through 2027, but it also addresses fraud and tries to rein in some of the practices of pharmacy benefit managers. Of course, we know those are the middlemen of the prescription drug supply chain. But, Steph, that petition needs 218 lawmakers to sign on it in order to even force a vote to begin with. And it's unclear if that vote happens, what the support would look like. But I will say that at this point, there are several Republicans in the House that are pushing for at least a 2-year extension of those Obamacare subsidies just to make more room and cushion to make more time for other reforms to the program, Steph.
Watching it all very closely. Thank you so much, NTD congressional correspondent Melina Weisskopf. And the U.S. House passed a massive defense policy bill yesterday, authorizing a record $901 billion in annual military spending.
Yeah, the 3,000-page bill includes a provision to review U.S. investments that go to China that could help develop China's military power. Here's more on the details on that.
On this vote, the yeas are 312, the nays are 112. The bill is passed without objection. A motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
The House passed a massive $901 billion defense spending bill on Wednesday. The tally was $312,112 and is $8 billion more than what President Donald Trump asked for. The 2026 National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, is used by Congress to advance priorities from troop pay raises to major weapons programs, making it closely watched by defense contractors. The bill provides $800 million in military assistance to Ukraine in the next 2 years and includes other measures reinforcing the U.S. commitment to Europe's defense. The bill also provides extensive support for Israel and mandates reviews of arms embargoes against the country and U.S. options to meet Israel's defense needs. This year's bill also focuses on cutting programs for VAD, such as diversity, equity, and inclusion training. The legislation is a compromise between versions of the NDAA passed earlier this year by the Senate and House, both controlled by Republicans. Members of both parties urged lawmakers to support it, even if they objected to individual provisions. Trump has said he will sign the NDAA into law once it reaches the White House.
Coming up, the Trump administration is proposing new rules that would require visa waiver travelers to submit 5 years of social media history.
Meanwhile, Homeland Security launches a New York task force in New York City to target transnational criminal organizations.
A federal judge orders the Trump administration to temporarily end its deployment of National Guard in Los Angeles. He said there was no obstruction of federal law.
And the new Trump Gold Card, it promises expedited residency for a price, while the administration accelerates deportations and hands a stretch of borderland to the U.S. Navy. We're going to have those stories and more. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. President Trump yesterday announced the official launch of his Immigration Gold Card.
NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on the policy, which will fast-track visas for certain immigrants in exchange for a very large fee.
During a roundtable at the White House, the president previewed the new program.
It's somewhat like a green card, but with big advantages over a green card.
The Trump Gold Card program will allow non-citizens to get an expedited permanent residency status in the United States if they donate $1 million to the country. They also need to pass a background check and pay a $15,000 processing fee to the Department of Homeland Security. Trump estimates the U.S. will take in billions of dollars, which he said will be used to do positive things for the country. The program isn't just for individuals. Businesses that want to keep talent will be able to apply for a Trump corporate gold card if they donate $2 million to the United States and pay a $15,000 processing fee. Trump said business chiefs like Apple CEO Tim Cook have complained it was too risky to hire foreign students without certainty they can stay in the country.
And companies are going to be able to go to the Wharton School of Finance, the Stern Business School, Harvard, MIT, wherever you may get your students, any school, and you're able to buy a card and keep that person in the United States.
Obviously, they have to be perfect people in America, and having passed the vetting, after 5 years, they'll be available to become citizens, and then the corporation can put someone else on the card.
Turning to border enforcement, the United States will soon have its own planes for deportations. The U.S. has agreed to purchase 6 Boeing 737 commercial passenger aircraft to conduct removal operations of illegal immigrants for about $140 million. The department says it will cost less to purchase and use these aircraft for removal operations than to continue using charter aircraft as it does at present. Assistant DHS Secretary Tricia McLaughlin says the initiative will save U.S. taxpayers nearly $280 million and help get criminal illegal aliens out of the country faster. Deporting illegal immigrants has been one of the highest priorities of the Trump administration. Homeland Security announced historic progress in that goal. It says more than 2.5 million illegal immigrants have left the U.S., calling it a record-breaking achievement. Since January 20th, DHS enforcement operations have resulted in more than 605,000 deportations, and 1.9 million illegal immigrants have voluntarily self-deported since January. They can get a free flight home and $1,000 by using the CBP Home app. Meanwhile, land along the southern border is being transferred to the Navy. The administration says it will hand over about 760 acres of public land near the California-Mexico border for 3 years to support security operations. Critics argue that deploying troops for border enforcement violates restrictions on military involvement in domestic law enforcement. The Interior Department says the land will be designated a national defense area to bolster immigration enforcement. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And thanks to Daniel for that report. Next, new travel rules could soon require visa waiver visitors to the U.S. to submit more personal information, including 5 years of social media history.
Meanwhile, Homeland Security officials announced a new task force in New York to combat transnational criminal networks. NTD's Christina Corona has those details.
The Trump administration is proposing new requirements for travelers from dozens of visa-free countries, including providing their social media history. Currently, citizens from 42 countries, including the UK, Germany, France, Australia, and Japan, can visit the U.S. for up to 90 days without a visa. Travelers must apply through the Electronic System for Travel Authorization, or ESTA, which the administration now wants to make mobile only and expand with additional personal data. The proposal would require visa waiver travelers to provide 5 years of social media history, email addresses used over the last 10 years, and personal information about immediate family members, including phone numbers and home addresses. Submitting social media history would be mandatory. U.S. Customs and Border Protection says the changes aim to enforce a Trump executive order targeting foreigners who may pose a threat to national security or public safety. The proposal is open for a 60-day public comment period. Meanwhile, the Department of Homeland Security held a press conference in New York Wednesday to announce a new Homeland Security task force. The task force is co-led by Homeland Security Investigations and the FBI, with support from U.S. attorneys' offices and numerous state and local agencies.
This task force is the first of its kind, using a whole-of-government approach. Through a unified framework, the HSTFs serve as a model for protecting the homeland from evolving threats presented by transnational organized crime.
The task force mission is to target transnational criminal organizations involved in drug trafficking, money laundering, weapons trafficking, human trafficking, and other federal crimes. The U.S. attorneys highlighted additional cases, including arrests of cartel leaders and prosecutions of individuals supporting the Jalisco cartel through fraud schemes. Officials say crime is down, but it is still way above where it should be.
New Yorkers want public safety. They want our parks, schools, subways, and streets to be both safe places and places that feel safe.
for our families, our children, and our visitors.
Officials also signed a memorandum of understanding officially marking the full implementation of the Homeland Security Task Force in New York. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Thanks to Christina for that report. And a federal judge has ordered the Trump administration to temporarily end its deployment of the National Guard in Los Angeles and return control of the Guard to the state of California. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
In a lengthy written order on Wednesday, federal judge Charles Breyer ordered the Trump administration to temporarily end the federalization of California's National Guard. Breyer said there was no evidence that federal law was being obstructed in Los Angeles, where 300 guardsmen have remained since the initial deployment in June. The judge rejected the Justice Department's argument that since the initial deployment was lawful, the court could not review subsequent redeployments of those troops. Breyer said the president's power to call up the National Guard for federal service is not an exclusive power, and that it can be checked by a judge. California Governor Gavin Newsom's attorney had argued that two subsequent 90-day extensions that pushed the deployment until February 2, 2026 were unjustified, and Breyer agreed. In June, Breyer granted Newsom's request to temporarily block the first deployment. President Trump had federalized 2,000 California National Guards in June after unruly protests broke out in response to federal immigration arrests. The government appealed that decision, but the appellate court has yet to make a ruling on it. Now, Breyer stated that by August, the situation in Los Angeles had calmed down and local police could handle the policing of the area, and that reports of unrest that occurred in October were isolated incidents that didn't warrant National Guard intervention. Rejecting the Justice Department's argument that the president was unable to execute laws with regular forces, the judge offered that the president could have made use of his own military stationed in California. The judge declined to grant Newsom's request for all future deployments to be automatically blocked and instructed him to challenge them in court. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And up ahead, the White House responded to the ruling, suggesting that the administration would appeal, saying it looked forward to, quote, ultimate victory on the issue. Spokesperson added that it's within the president's lawful authority to deploy the National Guard troops to assist federal officers in response to violent riots in the city.
Good point there. Next, the weather. An atmospheric river is unleashing heavy rain and historic flooding in western Washington state, triggering widespread evacuation orders.
That's right. The state's under an emergency declaration as authorities warn that rivers are rising rapidly. They could reach record levels.
In Skagit County, about 60 miles north of Seattle, officials told some residents to get to high ground immediately.
The National Weather Service is forecasting dozens of major and moderate floods as heavy rain continues.
In Bellingham, 90 miles north of Seattle, downpours have already shattered rainfall records, with nearly 2.5 inches of rain in 24 hours.
And while the heaviest rain may ease by today, forecasters say some rivers will take days to recede.
Next, federal health officials say more than 50 infants in 19 states have now been sickened in a botulism outbreak. It's linked to recalled baby formula produced by the company ByHeart. The FDA says it cannot rule out contamination across all ByHeart products ever produced. Last month, ByHeart recalled all formula sold nationwide and now says it's cooperating with federal authorities to understand the scope of the outbreak. No deaths have been reported, but the Department of Health and Human Services is warning families to stop using ByHeart formula immediately. And a Grammy-nominated musician is dead after a weekend crash in Rhode Island. And police say the driver who hit him had more than 100 prior arrests. 70-year-old bassist Roderick McLeod was walking his dog Saturday in Hope Valley when a vehicle suddenly veered out of its lane and struck him. Officers say 41-year-old Shannon Godbout hit multiple objects, including telephone poles, before colliding with McLeod. Police say Godbout was found with illegal narcotics and packaging materials tied to drug distribution. She remains in custody and faces preliminary charges, including driving to endanger resulting in death. Godbout's record includes more than 100 arrests, 82 warrants, and 40 prior traffic citations. McLeod earned a Grammy nomination with the band Roomful of Blues and taught at Brown University. And our hearts go out to his family.
Coming up, China's forced organ harvesting, concentration camps, and even torture in prisons. The China Human Rights Fair on Capitol Hill showcasing the persecution still happening today under the rule of the Chinese Communist Party. Stay with us for that. We'll be right back. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. If you're just joining us now, here are some of today's top headlines. President Trump announced yesterday that the U.S. seized control of a sanctioned oil tanker right off the coast of Venezuela. The move further increases tensions with Venezuela amid a massive military buildup in the region. Attorney General Pam Bondi said that the oil tanker has been sanctioned by the U.S. for years due to what she calls its, quote, involvement in an illicit oil shipping network supporting foreign terrorist organizations. And the U.S. House passed a massive $901 billion defense policy bill yesterday. The bill provides $800 million in military assistance to Ukraine in the next 2 years and provisions to review U.S. investments into China. The bill now heads to the Senate before heading to President Trump's desk. The Senate, meanwhile, is preparing to vote on 2 health care bills today. One bill is a clean extension of the Obamacare tax subsidies for the next 3 years. The other bill is a plan that would take the money granted to the subsidies and then put them into health savings accounts to help Americans pay their own out-of-pocket health costs and not go directly to the insurance companies. And the Federal Reserve has approved a quarter-point rate cut in a divided vote. Chair Jerome Powell called the move a close call, and President Trump criticized that the cut was too small, and he said higher rates are holding back the economy. Trump is weighing potential candidates to replace Powell when his term ends this coming May. And staying with President Trump, he has officially launched his new immigration gold card. It offers fast-track U.S. residency for non-citizens who donate $1 million and then pass vetting. In the announcement that comes as the administration also moves to tighten the visa waiver program. Travelers from 42 countries would be required to submit 5 years of social media history and other personal data. So those are this morning's top headlines. Steph, with that, over to you.
Thank you, Carrie. On Capitol Hill yesterday, several organizations took part in the China Human Rights Fair, showcasing the atrocities of the Chinese regime. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has that story.
In China, we have people whose rights are being violated.
The Chinese Communist Party's human rights abuses on full display here at the China Fair on Capitol Hill. Now, many people sharing their personal experiences about what it's like to suffer the atrocities under the Chinese Communist Party. Let's take a look.
My parents, both of them, has been arrested and detained to the sentenced to many times to the jail.
Lydia Wang is a practitioner of Falun Dafa, also known as Falun Gong, a spiritual meditation based on truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. It was introduced to the public in 1992, but in 1999, the CCP launched a brutal persecution against the practice due to its popularity and moral teachings. Wang's parents were immediately targeted. Her father was arrested and subjected to forced labor and tortured to permanent disability, later dying of his injuries.
My father came out from the jail and her health condition is very bad. And soon after, my father passed away.
Her mother was arrested for the 11th time in 2022, all because she was passing out information flyers about Falun Dafa. She's currently serving a 4-year prison sentence.
Falun Gong practitioners who I have known for a very long time simply for exercising their religious freedom. Chinese government are afraid of them because there is very significant number, and so we just need to keep up with our pressure.
And perhaps the most horrific is the CCP's use of forced organ harvesting.
Forced organ harvesting is something very unique to China. The Chinese regime is the only regime in the world that's harvesting organs from its own citizens.
It's primarily targeting Falun Dafa practitioners, but also Muslim Uyghurs, Tibetans, and Christians are subjected to the practice. killing them on demand in the process.
The Chinese government illegally imprisons these prisoners of conscience, and they have a data bank where they match the organs, they test their blood. These often go to high-ranking Chinese communist officials, but really to anybody in the world who's willing to pay.
Some people say, that sounds so terrible, why isn't it a headline every day? Against the backdrop of Chinese government propaganda, quite literally billions of dollars spent putting out news in every language as well.
One of the many bills to address this is the Falun Gong Protection Act. It passed the House earlier this year and is awaiting a vote in the Senate. One central message that we're hearing here at the China Fair is that it doesn't stop here. There needs to be more action taken from Congress to address these human rights abuses still happening in China today. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Thanks to Jack for that report. Up ahead, what if the person you thought would get your retirement savings ends up with nothing because a form wasn't updated? It's a mishap that can be easily avoided.
Make sure your paperwork aligns with your current wishes. We're going to have an expert join us and give us some advice on how you can do it. Stay with us.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Stephanie Cox. You've done the hard work, saved for retirement, built a nest egg, and bought life insurance. But when was the last time you checked who's listed as beneficiaries on the accounts you've worked so hard to build? Failing to review or update your paperwork can lead to loved ones getting the short end of the stick or even your wishes being ignored entirely. Founder of Midland Financial, Lawrence Sprung, joins us with what you need to know. Good to see you this morning, Larry. Over the course of our lives, beneficiary designations on assets like IRAs, 401ks, and life insurance could become outdated. Tell us what's the issue and what you recommend.
Yeah, so beneficiaries are probably one of the best and easily overlooked tools that we can use to make sure our assets go to whom we want them to go to. But unfortunately, many times, as you mentioned, life events take place. We get married, have kids, or maybe even one of our previous beneficiaries passes away. That should really trigger a look to make sure that your beneficiary designations on all of your accounts are the people who you want your assets to go to in case you're not here tomorrow.
Right, it's not a set and forget thing here, and there are so many different accounts, but you're saying not to assume the same person is named on all your accounts as well. Why is that?
Yeah, don't make an assumption on who you have named. I can share a story with a family that I worked with where the gentleman, for many years, I sat down with him, we checked his beneficiaries, and he was sure it was his wife. And we looked it up, and it was not. It was his mom, because he created this account before he was married. He named his mom as the beneficiary. And I stayed on top of him, calling him constantly, saying, you really want to update this if you want your beneficiary to be your wife. And it took him about 4 years to do that. Now, the problem with that is, had he passed away within that four-year period of time, his wife would not have received those assets, and his mom would have. And then the other thing you have to understand is if you don't have a beneficiary named at all on accounts that you can have a beneficiary, financial institutions, and depending on your state, things can act differently. In certain cases, it will just go to your estate, and then it will go through the probate process. And in other states, your spouse is the default beneficiary, which may or may not be where you want those funds to go.
So which accounts should people be looking at here when they're wanting to check?
So you should be checking all of your accounts. I mean, any account that has a beneficiary like life insurance, 401k, retirement accounts, those are easy ones because they have beneficiaries typically attached to them. So you want to check those, but also be mindful. Bank accounts, you can have transfer on death, you can have beneficiary designations on those. And I would say any account that you have where the financial institution will allow you to name a beneficiary, I would name a beneficiary, because what happens is it allows you to direct where that money's going to go if you're not here tomorrow, and you don't have to worry about having a will or a trust. Those assets will be transitioned to the people you name as beneficiaries. So, like you go for your annual checkup, do your annual beneficiary checkup. Look at all your accounts, look who the beneficiaries are, and make sure that they're current with your wishes.
And many people will have various accounts, but also have a will. And how do those two interact with each other when it comes to beneficiaries?
Yeah, so many times people will say to us, oh, you know what? I don't need to name a beneficiary because I have a will. My will will take care of it. And those assets are handled very differently. Number one is if you have a beneficiary attached to those accounts, the beneficiary designation will supersede the will. So in essence, even if you didn't have a will, those assets would go to the person that you wanted them to go to. So, don't rely on the will. And then the other thing is that if the asset does have to be transitioned to the beneficiary through the will, it has to go through probate process with a probate process. So depending on your state, that could be a long process, could be a short one, and it could be an expensive one too. So use the beneficiary for what it's used for in any place that you can use it.
Now, sometimes these designations are all right, but that's still not enough. In what situations can it be helpful to have a backup beneficiary? And what other final advice do you have for folks who are considering these issues?
Yeah, so typically people, if they name beneficiaries, they'll name a primary beneficiary, which means if I'm not around, my money will go to this person. Now, what happens is if they don't update it, then what happens, and they have nobody else, then it's going to go through their estate or their will or things like that. So you can name a primary beneficiary, the first person, and then a contingent beneficiary. So it prevents that if the primary beneficiary is not around, then the money would go to the contingent. Or in some cases, the primary beneficiary may say, I don't need this inheritance. I'm going to abstain from it and pass it on to the next generation. Whereas if you have that contingent, it's very, very helpful.
Much to look into here. So glad to have you on our show to lay out some of it and hopefully prevent some mishaps for people out there. Thank you so much, Lawrence Brown.
Thank you.
Always a good time of year to dot your I's,
yes,
cross your T's,
yes, indeed.
Get through the holidays, and then as the new year comes, it's time to
start afresh.
Look forward.
Look
That's
ahead.
right. All right, well, we do have to wrap up for now, but if you have any feedback on the show, or maybe there's a story you'd like to see Steph cover, send us an email at goodmorning@ntd.com. She would love to hear from you.
And for Round the Clock original news coverage, watch us live at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. I am Stephanie Cox.
And I'm Carrie Dodds. We'll see you soon. And how will the Fed's rate cut affect everyday Americans? Joining us to discuss is Joseph Trevisani. He's a senior analyst at FX Street. Thanks for joining us, Joseph. Your initial thoughts on yesterday's decision?
I'm not surprised by it. The Fed never makes, good morning, by the way, nice to see you all. The Fed almost never dissuades itself from making the rates at the end of the year what their projections say they were. So even though about 6 weeks ago, Mr. Powell was out there saying, well, maybe we're not going to do anything, it came around very quickly that the Fed would cut rates. They did. So I think for the economy going forward, there's questions. He made several good points yesterday that the decision either could have gone either way. What he really means is that the statistics, the information coming out of the economy is not strongly one way or the other. Inflation has come off, but not as much as they want. And jobs have weakened, not enough to perhaps be terribly concerned about it, but certainly enough to worry about it. So that's where the Fed came down. The most interesting thing, I think, in the projections yesterday was the 0.5 point increase actually 0.6 in the GDP projections for next year. That's up to 2.3%. That, I think, is telling you that the Fed sees a good chance we're going to get a stronger economy next year.
Now, can you take us a level deeper into this split decision? It was 9-3, and what might be at play, inside of those who voted to keep the rate steady?
You're right. I hate to go to politics, and I'm going to edge around this one, but it's certainly true that the votes were the 3 votes that did not vote for the rate cut. Mirren, who was appointed by Trump, and Schmid and Goolsbee, who were appointed by President Biden. Voted for no rate cut. You know, the thing about this particular decision, one, three dissenters are unusual. But more importantly, I think that both sides could have a credible argument about what should be done. And I think Mr. Marin could say, you can, as Mr. Trump has said, you need greater rate cuts to spur the economy. Okay, you can make that argument if you look at the non-farm payrolls. Mr. Schmid and Mr. Goolsbee said, well, inflation hasn't come down enough. So you can make an argument there as well. I think in the end, the Fed came down on its pretty much its bureaucratic statement having to do with where the rates would be at the end of the year. So it is a bit unusual, and I'm trying not to lay it to politics, but to the competing arguments, which are both pretty valid at this point.
Let's talk about how this affects everyday Americans. I mean, the most obvious things that I think of when I think of interest rates are, are more people sitting on those very low mortgage rates finally going to offer to sell their house and maybe get this housing market pumping, but also auto loans and credit cards. So how might a quarter point and the 3 successive quarter points play out for people as they think about their finances in the new year?
Well, at this point, you've seen, because the markets always anticipate, they front run any sort of Fed cutting rate or raising rates. They always are ahead of the curve on that. So for this one, I don't think this particular rate decrease is going to have any effect really whatsoever on the market rates that you're talking about. What will have an effect is when we start into next year, what the markets start to view as what we're going to see next year. Right now, the Fed futures and the Fed itself has very few rate cuts in the bargain right now. They've got 1 cut next year and then 1 cut the following year. Nobody thinks that's going to hold. What we need to see, and what Mr. Powell has said, is that we need to see some direction in the economy as to where it's going to go. And right now, we don't know. The one hint is the one I said before earlier of 2.3%, which they increased the growth rate for 2026. Another point is that the GDP now projections from the Atlanta Fed are running at 3.5% for the third quarter. That's a very fast rate of growth for a mature economy like the United States. So for the consumer, I think what we're likely to see at this point is stronger growth next year. Will that by itself bring down market interest rates? No, I don't think it will. And in addition, if you get stronger growth, especially if you get that continuing into the fourth, and the first quarter next year, 3.5%, 3% growth is going to be very unlikely to have the Fed reduce rates anymore.
When we talk about growth, we see AI, we see the foreign investment, but some fear that that's not necessarily, and AOC made an interesting point, actually, I think it was the week before last, about how if you took out all the AI and tech companies, that the growth maybe doesn't look the way that it looks, the way that you just described it. So what does this mean for sort of, people on Main Street and grocery prices and the things that are kitchen table topics?
Well, that's true. I think that the tech valuations that you're talking about in the stock market are one reflection of the strength of certain sectors of the economy. And you're absolutely right that you wouldn't see much in stock prices as high as they are, certainly, if you didn't have the enormous growth there. That growth, I don't think really has translated back into the economy. What you're talking about, consumers, jobs. Are we going to see greater job creation from the AI sector? I would say right now that the 3.5% that growth that the Atlanta Fed is projecting in the third quarter is not directly really related to AI production of jobs. So I would say that the economy is running along in 2 separate paths here, as it often does. The stock market has one set of valuations looking very strongly into the future as to what the economy is going to do. And then you have the Main Street economy producing jobs, which it's not doing very much now, but we're hoping for with 3.5% growth. So I don't think the AI is at the moment going to generate a lot of jobs.
Well, there's a lot to look out for, and seems like things are heading in the right direction. Appreciate your analysis this morning, Joseph Trevisani. Great to see you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's always enjoyable.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. Retail stores have long experimented with pricing, and this seems to be happening at grocery stores that partner with delivery apps.
One study found that people who used Instacart for shopping were charged different prices for the same groceries from even the same store. NTD's David Lamb has more on that story.
The nonprofit Consumer Reports and Groundwork Collaborative have found that some people are paying different prices for the same items on Instacart. The months-long investigation says that identical items on the Instacart grocery app could vary as much as 23% in cost from one person to the next. Researchers found that basket totals varied by an average of about 7% for the exact same items from the exact same locations at the exact same time. For example, one of the results in Washington, D.C., a dozen eggs sold for 5 different prices, $3.99, $4.28, ranging up to $4.79 depending on the user. The report says that Instacart uses AI-based experiments to test prices by charging different amounts for identical items. More than 400 participants were part of the study, and they shopped for identical baskets of goods from Safeway and Target stores. Target says it has no business relationship with Instacart. In response, Instacart says it uses Target's publicly displayed prices and adds an additional amount to offset operating and tech costs. According to the report, Instacart has said price differences between customers would be negligible. Instacart stated, "These limited short-term and randomized tests help retail partners learn what matters most to consumers and how to keep essential items affordable," and that only 10 of its retail partners are testing prices, quote, "just as retailers have long tested prices in their physical stores." NTD tried comparing the prices of eggs and noodles on 3 different devices from 2 different people on a laptop, Android phone, and iPhone, but the prices appeared to be the same as of Wednesday afternoon. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
Next, Mexico City's Main Avenue is now awash in red. The country is showcasing one of its most famous contributions to Christmas, the bright poinsettia flower.
Ah, the poinsettia. Yeah. A poinsettia grower explains the process behind the Christmas tradition. Have a look at this.
La Nochebuena es una planta muy tradicional.
The poinsettia is a traditional plant for the Christmas season. It takes an 8-month process to grow. We work for 8 months to reach the blossom on Christmas Eve so that people can take to their homes a flower that impresses with the December red and white colors that represent us and Christmas Eve.
Esta planta es un símbolo para todo el mundo.
The flower is a symbol for the world because it conveys love for Christmas, love for what we want and what we believe in. I think that if you put one of these plants in your home, you'll feel the warmth and love this Mexican plant gives.
The Library of Congress says the bright red poinsettias date back to the colonial era when Franciscan friars used the colorful plant to decorate altars.
But it wasn't until the 19th century that the flower became known outside of Mexico. After the first U.S. ambassador to Mexico, Joel Poinsett, sent samples back to Philadelphia.
Today, millions of poinsettias are sold during the Christmas season. They can be seen everywhere, in homes, businesses, and in public areas. I'm sure you've seen them. What a sight to see.
Good old Franciscan friar sourcing the poinsettia. There you have it. Great story.
Great history there. Moving over to Argentina, where there has been a golden sight in the capital. More than 2,000 golden retrievers gathering in an effort to set a new world record.
How awesome is that? Golden retrievers gathering. I like it when they gather. Yeah. It's like they're birds. Excitement buzzed through Buenos Aires this week. Golden retriever owners from across Argentina, they came together to transform a park into a sea of yellow fur.
Dog lovers of all ages spread out on picnic blankets, soaking in the sight of so many fluffy companions.
The event's organizer proudly announced that Argentina now officially broke the informal world record with a total of 2,397 golden retrievers, and that number exceeds Vancouver's previous mark of 1,685 goldens set just last year. I have to say, some of those that were in that muddy water, they didn't look golden. They looked golden on top, but brown on the bottom. Look at that guy.
Looks like he's having a great time.
He's having fun. But yeah, when you get that in your car or your house, man, that's you got to get the hose out for that.
Right.
Oh, man, just looking at this footage, though, makes me smile. There's never a more smiley dog than the Golden Retriever and the Labrador Retriever. They're
if you have a mischievous one, they all look the same, so you better not let it off your leash.
Yeah, that's true. If you get it off your leash, it's going to be tough to find your dog. Yeah. So, well, congrats to Argentina. You know, they're putting forth the good effort,
Hats off to them.
They've got the win. Sorry, Vancouver. I'd like to see the U.S. maybe compete for that title. We'll have to see what happens.
We'll have to see.
Well, we do have to end it here, but if you have any feedback on the show, maybe you'd like to see more Golden Retriever stories, let us know. Yeah. Send us an email, goodmorning@ntd.com. We want to know what kind of dog stories you're looking for.
And in the meantime, to watch us live round the clock, you can catch us at ntd.com/live or catch us on our app. I'm Stephanie Cox.
I'm Carrie Dunst. Have a great day.